Good morning everyone. Thank you all for coming. I know it's a nice day and a lot of you could have been at the beach, but you all chose to come here and listen to me. So thank you. Thank you. Today we will be discussing working with investors. This is something I'm very passionate about, and a little bit about my story and why I want to speak about this today is I feel that investors is a underutilized opportunity that a lot of agents don't focus on. And I'm going to cover the advantages of working with investors, how to attract investors as well as retain them, and what to understand and how to speak their lingo and how to really add value with working with investors. Now, this is not a training on, hey, stop doing what you're doing and shift your entire business. This is not to shift your business model, but this is more understanding the opportunity, seeing it, and then learning how to execute on that opportunity of working with investors. So I'm going to start off with the book recommendation. Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek, where he talks about doing more in less time. Anyone here want to do more deals in less time? Anyone here want to generate listings in less time? Right? That is the concept. So if you're looking to scale, but not necessarily add time into your work life, that's a great book to read. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and I will need some participation, so please don't be shy. What is the buying cycle of a buyer, right? So you meet John Doe, he and his wife, they're in their 30s, they buy a home with you. I want some numbers here. How many homes do you think they're going to buy with you in their lifetime? Two? Three? Anyone else? Six? Six? Wow, you're following up. Great job. Anyone else? Here is the average per NAR. 3 homes in their lifetime. So I'm going to ask another question. What do you guys think the average buying cycle is for an investor? 6? 20. And this guy works with investors. Anyone else? 12? Do you guys see the difference? 3 versus, I think we're averaging about 10 homes. Huge opportunity. And here's the great thing. It doesn't take 20 years to get to the 10 homes. Whereas a regular buyer, you have to wait out their cycle of when they outgrow their condo, they buy the bigger home, and then later they want to downsize, right? So working with investors is a great opportunity to really triple, quadruple, or 5x that number in a short amount of time. And I'm going to tell you guys from my experience, and we're going to discuss this, who's someone that owns an investment property versus a real investor that's doing this full time and this is their livelihood. My real guys that are investors are doing on average 10 to 12 homes a year. You don't have to wait 20, 30 years to get those 10 to 12 home sales. So that's the opportunity and why I wanted to discuss this. And a little bit about my background. I got to start in the market as an agent in the great market of 2008. Anyone remember that market? So you hear the irony in the great market of 2008, right? And what did we have then? Lending stopped. We went into a deep recession. Everyone was fearful of buying a home because the prices were plummeting. But what you had is investors. Investors came out and said, hey, the prices just dropped 40%, whatever it was in whatever market, and this is the time for us to buy. So I started working with investors. Unintentionally, a couple years later, the homes I sold in 2008, 9, and 10, I didn't realize these guys would be calling me to relist. And then the light bulb went on. Wait a minute, I didn't have to go on 30 listing appointments to get 20 listings. I just had to keep finding homes for these investors and they would turn around to listings. So that's how I got into working with investors. And funny thing, we're back in a market, I know this is a little hard to read, but this is from the Washington Post and they published this in February. Can anyone guess in the US how many homes were sold to investors? And I'll make it easy. 1 out of 10, give me a number. How many homes did you think investors bought out of 10 homes? 7? Anyone else? Guys, you guys awake? 6? 5? Well, I'm going to make it a little bit hyper-local now. And this is from data that's pulled and verified. In our metro, which you can't see this map, unfortunately, with the lighting, but 10% of homes purchased in our metro were bought by investors. So 1 out of 10, which is a huge number for just our metro area. Now, throughout the United States, it's 1 out of 7 homes were bought by investors. So they are a big buyer pool that a lot of us are ignoring. And I understand why. Anyone here ever get a call from an investor and you hang up and you're like, oh my gosh. I hear the show of hands, right? They're demanding. They ask you a lot of questions. But here's the good news of why you guys should consider working with investors. Multiple deals, repeat business. It's a systemized business. They're typically not calling you like a seller on a Saturday night at 7 o'clock to talk about all the showings that happened that day, right? They're running a business and they're not usually calling you on the evenings and all weekend to find out what happened with each and every showing. They know the process. Easier terms. They're easier to finance. A lot of them are cash, so your deals get accepted a lot easier because of their terms. Rehabs sell at higher prices, right? They're at usually the top of the market, equal to new construction. So what does that mean for you guys when the homes are selling at higher prices? Bigger commission, right? Faster sales, easier deals. And typically they're on the market for less days, easier deals. But as I alluded to before, anyone want to shout some of the not so fun parts of working with some investors?
They want you to find off-market deals.
They want you to find off-market deals. That's part of the value you got to bring. Anyone else? No challenges? Tanya, go ahead.
It's crazy, like the low offers that they want you to send and expect to get the offer accepted.
Well, you're a miracle worker. You're a realtor, right? Right? And that's why I have this graphic. But they do make lowball offers. They do ask a lot of questions. Sometimes they don't know repair cost. They even want you to write, you never know. Anyone ever get that? Hey, write that offer, and you're like, there's no way. And they say, you never know, right? You never know. Offers, that's what I call them. They won't follow the process. They're very bossy, and they need a lot of hand-holding. But guys, here's what I want you to take away from this slide. There's a big difference between someone that owns an investment property versus an investor, that this is their livelihood. And you guys have to learn to differentiate that. Because if you can, you will see the opportunity to work with someone that can do 7 to 10 deals a year. How many listing appointments would you have to go on to get 7 to 10 listings? 15, what other numbers? 50? How many calls would you have to make to generate those appointments? Hundreds, right? How much money would you spend on farming? How much time would you have to spend door knocking? But if you can differentiate someone that owns an investment property or someone that's starting out as an investor versus someone that is a full-time, this is their business, they don't work at the gas station, they don't work at Wawa, and this is what they do, you have an opportunity. So, how do you figure that out? How do you find the investor's profile? What should you look for? How do you differentiate? Let's cover that. Someone that does it full time. The guys that do it full time that sell 10 to 12 homes a year, they know equal or sometimes more than the novice new agents, right? This is their livelihood. I don't know how they know the numbers because Zillow's not accurate, but somehow they know their comps. Doesn't need hand-holding. Expects great service. They will be upfront and honest with you. That's the investor profile. And they want to work with someone long-term. No one wants to work with, Dennis has this listing, Carl has that listing, Mary has the other listing, and they're chasing 5 or 6 different agents. They want to work with one agent, but they have to find the right agent and they will commit to you. Best thing about it is, if you can differentiate and figure it out, guys, which I hope I'm going to help with today, you will make a lot of money with that investor. So when do investors make money? When they buy or when they sell? Sell? How many people say sell? Raise their hands. How many people say buy? Raise their hands. Tell you the answer to that. They make money when they buy. If they buy the house right, they are making money. If they overpay for the house, they are not making money. And that's one of the things you need to learn and be able to articulate to investors. I'll give you guys a quick sidebar to this. There's a whole sub-industry that has been built around buying homes right or putting homes under contract at the right price. Can anyone guess what that is? Wholesaling, right? So the money's made when you buy. Know that, because that's what investors look for. That's why they want the off-market. Believe that there's better deals off-market than on the market. I can argue that point, and I have all the data to prove that that's wrong. There's deals on both. But remember, guys, the money's made on the buy. If you buy the house right, you will automatically be making money. You don't even have to renovate it. You can wholesale it or just put it on the market as is. You will make money. So the money's made on the buy. How to determine if someone's an investor or an amateur. You guys want to learn about this? Ask questions. And here are some of the questions you may want to ask. What's your experience? That tells you a lot, right? Someone who hasn't flipped a house yet or hasn't renovated a house or has no tenants, they are starting out. You're going to approach it differently because they need hand-holding. They are the ones that won't follow the process. They are the ones that are going to make lowball offers. They're the ones that won't know numbers and will need a lot more help from you. Another easy question to ask is, what's your strategy? If they cannot answer this question, you already know and automatically know that they have not done this and they are not yet an investor. And by the way, you're not going to beat them up and say, ha ha, you're not an investor, you're an imposter. No, right? But you're going to approach it differently. And how you work with them, what you offer them as far as service, setting expectations, and how to approach it. How are you financing your investments? Because everyone says they're what? 4-letter word. Starts with a C. Cash. Is hard money cash, guys? I want to say a hard no. Anyone here ever see a hard money letter when you get an offer and someone's using hard money as a pre-approval? Anyone here ever see that on a listing? It says, whether it's ABC hard money or whatever bank or whatever institution, it says you're approved or there's X amount of funds that will be lent towards this purchase. It's a loan. Hard money's not cash, and you have to realize that, because when someone tells you they're cash and you go to bat for them with the listing agent and then they send you a pre-approval from a hard money lender, you're going to lose all credibility, right? So ask them, how are you financing your investments? And if they say cash, say, great, do you have proof of funds you can send me that's liquid in the last 30 days from your bank? And if it's a hard money letter that they send over, you need to have a conversation. What kind of properties are you looking for, right? There's a plethora of different strategies, property types, locations, etc. Ask them what type of properties are they looking for, what have they bought in the past, what are they looking in, who's on your team? That's a big one, because if they've done it before, they have a team. And I'm making this interactive. Who are the team members? Who are the team players? Let's shout it out. Contractors, attorneys, home inspector, title, lenders, right? If they don't have a team, you know how to approach that. They are a novice. Nothing's wrong with that, but it's a different approach than the guys you're really going after. What do you need from me? You know, to your point, I need off markets. That's probably one of the most popular ones. And there's a ARV. Don't steal my thunder, Johnny. Don't steal my thunder. But yes, you're right. The way to address the off markets is you guys can find it on the MLS. Have a PDF, whether it's you, for those of you that are investing, whether it's an investor you work with, whether it's deals you've seen on the market. You can make a PDF of all the before and afters, bought on the market, sold on the market. And when someone stresses you, I'll buy anything, but it has to be off market. If you can send them that and demonstrate that there are deals on market, here's plenty of examples, you can change that narrative and conversation. Easy to do, guys. The before and afters are on the market. So this is why I said don't steal my thunder, is the next slide. If there's 2 or 3 things you take away from today, this is the big one. The way you win with investors, and one of the key things that you need to know, is ARV. Anyone want to shout out what that stands for? After repair value, absolutely. Anyone want to take a guess? Why is that so important?
Because that's their profit.
That's how they determine their profit and if it's a good deal or not. It's not just the buy, it's also what can I sell it for? And if you can't get that number right, you're going to buy the wrong property because you can't evaluate what it's worth when it's done. And this is a skill set you can learn, but it's just like running comps. If you master the ARV, you'll know when it's a good buy. And it is something, to Johnny's point, that investors always look for. Because they don't have comps, they don't have the MLS, they rely on us. And if you learn this, you are the golden ticket to them. So, how do you know ARV, and how do you really break down what a good deal looks like, right? Because now you're going to study, and if anyone needs help with ARV, please reach out to me afterwards. But once you learn how to really find and have a process to come to ARV, how do you dissect a deal? We're going to have some fun and talk about numbers. And I know realtors like to multiply by 5 and 6, and that's the only number they care about, 5 and 6%. But let's do this. This home was purchased at $300,000. They spent $100,000 renovating it, and then they turned around and sold it for $500,000. So I got some numbers up here. I wanted to make it interesting. How many people here think the profit was $100,000? Show of hands. How many here think it was B, $28,600? And I just put some random numbers. All right, couple people. How many people here think it was a $49,000 profit? All right. How many people think it could be either B or C depending on your financing? And how many people think I just wanted to screw around this morning and it's none of the above? I like to have some fun, right? So here's the answer. The answer is actually D. And I'm going to break down some rough numbers because it depends on how you financed it. Your profit margins will vary based on cash or hard money or conventional or whatever type of loan. So I played it out what most investors do, which is either mostly hard money, alternatively cash. Very rarely do investors use conventional loans. I know there's a couple lenders in here from First Team Mortgage, and if I ask the question, they'll be able to answer it. But does anyone else outside of First Team Mortgage know why most investors won't use conventional loans? That's one very good reason. Time frame, tax returns, all the hurdles you have to jump through to get a regular mortgage, right? A lot of those reasons.
You can't buy it through an LLC.
You cannot finance it through an LLC. I'll let the lenders verify that. Is that a yay or a nay, guys?
You can, with conventional, you can now.
All right, perfect,
That's correct.
perfect. But correct, for a conventional, if it's a dump. So let's break down what the hard money financing looks like. And guys, you don't have to master this, but you need to understand it. Because if you bring a deal to an investor and tell them it's a $100,000 profit, they will look at you, the real investors, and say, I can't work with you. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but the reality is there's a bunch of fees that we tend to forget. There's a bunch of costs that we tend to forget. But if you can articulate that to an investor on a first meeting, or you're pitching a property that they should buy so you can relist it when they're done and make commission on the buy and commission on the sale, and you break down all the numbers that most agents forget, what do you think you've just done with that investor? You've won him or her over, that they're gonna trust you, like you, know that you know your stuff, and they're gonna commit to you. So here's how you break down what a hard money deal looks like and why the profit was roughly $28,600. Purchase price $300. We all agree on that, right? Do I need to get some mimosas in here, right? All right. Here's one of the numbers agents forget. There's acquisition closing costs. Vacant dwelling insurance is one of the highest insurance policies you can buy when you're buying a vacant home that's staying vacant because it's high risk for the banks. I'm sorry, for the insurance company. Title, you need title insurance, you need title policy, you're paying attorneys. Lender fees aren't hard money. You're typically paying about, give or take, 2 to 3 points up front. There's application fees and there's some quote unquote junk fees. Long story short, you're gonna have closing costs on the buy. The 100,000 renovation costs, you guys are following that, right? So 100,000 renovation costs. And here's another one that sometimes we forget. You're carrying the property for 6 months. Let's say New Jersey, average taxes are $12,000. $6,000 of carrying the property from the time you bought it to the time you close. But that's something you have to factor in because it's an expense. And I have 3,000 in soft costs, which we'll cover on the next slide. 14,400 in hard money payments. A lot of people don't know this, but hard money loans are mortgages. You are making monthly payments just as if it was Bank of America, Wells Fargo, et cetera. And anyone want to throw numbers out at what you think the interest rates are on hard money loans? 10, 12, 9.5. You guys are all right. 12 to 15, it's all in that ballpark based on your experience, based on the deal, based on your loan to value. So those payments are higher. So in 6 months, you're paying about 14.4 in interest, and I think I calculated that at 9%. Then here's the big one that a lot of people miss out on. When you're selling a property, you guys in here are all realtors. How do you guys get paid? Commissions, 5 or 6%, right? That's what you want from your investors, right? You found them the deal, you're owed that, but 5% of 500 is 25 grand. Then you have real estate transfer tax. You have your attorneys. Are there ever walkthrough issues? Right? So you have credits that you're giving. Long story short, you can easily be at a $35,000 closing cost on your way out. So add the closing costs on the purchase, add the closing costs on the way out, take out the hard money payments. That's how you get to a 28.6 gross profit. So it looks all sexy and 100 grand, and you break that down, guys, and it's not. Still a great profit, Frank.
So my question is on the purchase, why would you use the full purchase price rather than the down payment that the investor would make, his own cash?
What do you?
Why are you using the full purchase price? You said it was a hard money loan, so there'd have to be, would just be the down payment from the investor, correct?
Well, I have 300 as the purchase price. So are you referring to the closing cost?
That's not all the, I'm saying that's not the investor's money, 300.
That's what they're buying it for.
But they're only putting.
They're only putting 20%. Correct.
So the rest of it's the hard money loan. So wouldn't they be calculating their profit on their own?
No.
Investment?
No, because you're taking the gross numbers. Not, hey, I only put 20%, but let's just look at the gross numbers. I bought it for 5. Sold it for 5, paid 300. You know, you're paying for it. So yes, I see your point. What my out of pocket is, that's a different question, which is like cash on cash, what I put out of pocket versus what I get. But I'm just talking about gross profit on that particular property. Great. So let's break down the difference of cash. $500,000 sale, $300,000 purchase. Closing costs are different on the acquisition because you don't have what? Lender fees, bingo. You don't have points. You don't have application fees because you are buying in cash. Renovation costs stay the same. Carrying costs of taxes stay the same. You have 0 monthly payments because you're buying it in cash. Your closing costs on the way out are the same. And this is really breaking down soft costs, which people sometimes forget. You know, you have utilities, you're paying for snow removal, grass, you have to clean the place a couple times. That's how you get to a bigger profit margin. So does everyone see the difference between doing a deal in cash versus hard money? That's why it's very important to know who your investor is, how they're financing a property, and what their strategy is, right? Because if you know that they're financing it through hard money, you know that certain deals may not work because the numbers are too tight. If you know they're cash, on the other hand, some deals that may be too tight for guys financing, they may be able to do those deals. So it is important for you to understand and take one thing away from today, if you can, besides ARV, so it's 2 things rather, sorry. And that's the soft costs, that's the closing costs on the way in, closing costs on the way out. We tend to forget that when we're running numbers.
How do you know a good hard lender versus
A good hard money lender versus a fly-by-night?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's a very good question. I would say two things. One, I would ask that client, have they worked with them before? Because if they have, then it's working. And two, you can vet them through your lender. A lot of your regular lenders, as our guys here, they do what's called non-QM, and we're going to talk about that later. These non-qualified mortgages, these investment type of products, and they can sometimes tell you, yes, I've heard of this bank, or no, stay away. So you got to do some research. But typically, if the client is coming with ABC hard money lender, just ask them, how many deals have you done with them before? If the answer is 0, you better make some more calls, right? But if they said, hey, I've done my last 5 with them, then you know they're in good hands. So how do you add value as a realtor? Saving the investor money on not over-improving. Anyone ever go to a renovated house or a new construction and you're like, whoa, they went overboard? Anyone ever here flip a home and you made it a passion project? Full disclosure, my first couple flips, I was making passion projects. I was going home to my wife, like, you should see how I designed this. It's amazing. I was looking at the pictures. I would drive by after the sale. Like, I did that, right? Then I learned that it's numbers and it's a systemized business. And now I sell something and I drive by and I make sure not to look. I don't want to see it, right? But help investors. This is one of the ways you can add value. They rely on you. Besides ARV, the next important thing is you guys are the ones in the field with buyers. You guys know and have the pulse on what's working, what they want, right? So one of the things you can do is stopping them, and these are examples, guys, but stopping them from over-improving by not tiling the entire bath floor to ceiling. Where you walk in, has anyone ever done this? Like, wow. And you're like, neck goes back because you're like, they really did that, right? Helping them not do those things. Using real wood versus engineered wood versus laminate wood, like different markets require different things. If you're in Rumson, you better put the most expensive hardwood floors you can find. If you're a couple towns over, you can get away with engineered or laminate, right? Same thing with the Brunswicks, or same thing with Cranford versus a Roselle where I grew up. So know where you are as far as territory and know what the market calls for in that area. Painting versus siding. Sometimes you can paint. Sometimes you need siding. It depends on where you are, how bad it is, and look at the cost. 1-zone cooling versus 2-zone cooling. I consistently have this argument with my HVAC guy that's always trying to get me to do multiple zones, and I have to remind them at my house I have 1 zone, so I am not doing that at this flip. Right? So learn that stuff. But if you're in an area where there's a lot of new construction or bigger homes and every other home in the market has 2-zone, they got to go with 2-zone. And that's the difference of making $29,000 or $49,000 profit, $39,000 or $59,000 profit. If you can increase their profit margins, are they going to have a problem paying you guys 5 or 6%? We're talking commission, guys. Realtors, commission. No, they will not have a problem paying you guys more if you can add value. So that makes the investor very happy and loyal. So to your point, finding off-market properties, here's another thing that investors look for. And you don't have to be an expert at this. I built my business without having to source properties for investors, but because I lived on the hot sheet on the MLS, I very often found good deals and showed them that through the market we can. And they knew, don't expect Olivier to go knock on doors and cold call and try to get these off-market deals, because my properties that I was finding for them were always on market. But the MLS hot sheet was my golden ticket. Join off-market groups. One quick tip, if you really want to go down this lane of working with investors, there's a ton of Facebook groups for off-market properties, NJ off-market properties. There's a list of them. If you join them, every now and then they'll post something a couple times a week. And hey, I got a 3-bed, 2-bath home for $300,000 in this town, and you will see a dozen or 2 dozen emails like, send me the info. All you have to do is take those email addresses, create a spreadsheet or put them in your CRM, and you can follow up. Hey, I'm Olivier, I'm a realtor with RE/MAX, and I saw that you're looking at investment properties. We're in the same Facebook group. What's your strategy? Do you buy, sell, fix, flip, etc.? And free way to lead generate, free way to build your sphere, free way to get in front of investors that are actively doing it because they're actively online. Easy. REO and short sales. I think there's at least one REO guy in here today, but that's where you find a lot of deals. Pay attention to the market. Create searches for the REO agents in your MLS or whatever MLSs you use, where whenever that REO agent puts up a new listing, you automatically get emailed. You don't even have to search for it. You get that email at Garden State is 4 a.m. I don't know when the other MLSs send it, but that's a cool trick to be able to keep an eye on the REOs. You can create a search in the MLS that every short sale you get emailed. If it comes in and the agent checks off it's a short sale, which they're supposed to, you get an email. So you don't even have to go searching. You get those deals, and now you can circle them out to your investors. Prospecting, homes with issues. Do deals die and you see like the MLS update, oil tank contamination, seller will not remediate? Those are great deals. There's always a fix for those. Most people run away, and you have a great opportunity with the seasoned investor because they will absolutely run towards those. I have investors say the worse the property, the better for them because they have more profit margin. Cold calling, sheriff sales. These are some of the ways you could source properties for investors. They will expect it, as you mentioned, they want off markets. So I like to say the easiest of these all is the MLS hot sheet. MLS hot sheet, set up some searches with the REO agent, set up a search that all the short sales get emailed to you. Your life will be much easier. So let's talk about some market trends. During the pandemic, what happened to these type of sales? REOs, what happened? Gone. Courts were closed, the banks could not foreclose and take their properties back, and they could not list them with REO agents. They also could not get tenants out, etc. Relocation. I have a friend of mine in a different state. She was big on relocation, and guess what happened during the pandemic? No relocation business. Does anyone think relocation business is coming back? It may. Jury's still out on that with a lot of people working from home, right? But that business was down. Short sales. Courts closed, you can't perform sheriff sales. People were not motivated to do short sales because they know they couldn't get evicted. But same thing with the crash of 08, new construction as well. Here's the beauty. Investors buy in all markets. Anyone watch Jim Cramer? There's always a bull market somewhere, right? Investors buy in all markets. I started in the great market of 08, and I worked with a ton of investors, first timers to seasoned guys that ran into the market to buy because prices were up. During the pandemic, fix and flips up. So much demand. Record-breaking prices. Wholesaling up. Wholesaling is created because of the opportunity with buying properties low and reselling them. That market has exploded, the amount of wholesalers and calls and emails and letters that we're getting, right? So in a bad market or good market, what you're gonna have is investors wanna fix and flip, investors wanna wholesale, multifamily sales are up. Why do you guys think multifamily sales are up? What's happened to rents? Sky high, just like these prices of homes, right? So this is a really great graph. Might be a little hard to see here, but this follows housing prices and the rental market since 1985, as well as all other goods. And this is from the Bureau of Labor stats. The rents are the middle. Who made out the best? The landlords. They didn't have a dip in 08, 09, 2010. They never had a dip. Rents are consistently going up. There hasn't been a rental market crash. And I looked at this historically from like the Great Depression. The rental market has never crashed. So there's a huge opportunity with what? Who? What type of buyers? Landlords. And I get it. Anyone here ever take a rental listing and you got 80 calls the first week? Is it just me? right? It's a lot of work, it's a lot of calls, but here's the beauty of working with landlords. They usually own what? More than one property. They're easy to get the rental listings. You call a landlord and you say, hey, I'm gonna do a credit check, eviction check, background check, and by the way, the tenants are gonna pay the commission. What do you think they're saying? Go. Why? Because they don't wanna deal with the 80 calls as well. And here's the beauty of working with landlords. It's not about that one rental listing, but what happens, and it's happened twice in my career where my landlord said, I'm selling my portfolio. And you get to list whatever they have, 5 properties, 10 properties, 15 properties, and they just want to dump it all. It's the relationship. It's a long-term play that one day they're going to sell off their portfolio and you just got 10 listings at once. How else can that happen? Right? So landlords are a long-term play. They don't like the amount of calls, so they'll hire you. They're very easy to get because tenants are willing to pay the commission. And also you solve a problem for them because you can offer property management through CMS. So reaching out to landlords, I know a lot of agents that do extremely well dealing with landlords because most agents run from that. And I'm not talking about the person that lives in a 2-family and they want you to rent out their upstairs unit. I'm talking about the guys that have 50 doors, 20 different properties all over town and can't handle it, and they need a resource. So how do you appeal to the landlords? Help them find bigger investments. One of the guys that sold his portfolio winded up selling about 10 properties to go buy, I think he bought 2 big buildings at like 20 units each. Unfortunately, he bought them out of state because of tax purposes, so I was not the buyer agent on that, but I could tell you he spent about $8 million, which would have been a nice payday on top of selling his 10 properties had he done them in New Jersey. But that's the play with landlords. They will upsize and upgrade into bigger commercial properties that you can refer if you're not able to do it or don't want to do it or can't find it. But if you are in a position where you're in a market where you can find it for them, it's a really good payday. Keep up with rental values. Rents have skyrocketed. Let them know. It's so easy to call a landlord and say, hey, did you know that this 2-bedroom now goes for $1,800 versus the $1,400 I saw you rented out 2 years ago in the MLS? Is that tenant still there? Oh my gosh, $1,800? No, the tenant's about to leave. Great, can you take care of this? Know the city codes, rules. Sometimes you need a certificate of occupancy to rent. Sometimes you don't. Be responsive. Get resources, different contractors, different resources. If you can solve problems for them and you could be a referral person for them, they will love you and absolutely give you all of their business. And the other thing is, what kind of friends do landlords keep typically? Other landlords. Other people in their network have properties. So they're just a massive referral source. So real quick skinny on marketing to investors, outmarket everyone else. Be consistent. You are always marketing yourself. Always put signs on your listings. Always get professional photography. Social media needs to be very intentional. Think about what you're doing. Don't alienate sellers because you're posting about this or that, right? Think about who you're marketing to. Use floor plans. This is a big one for me because it helped me. I was in a market where no one was doing floor plans and I was doing floor plans and I got investors calling me just because I was doing that. Have buyers ever asked you guys for floor plans? Yep. So rather than taking a drone footage of a 25 by 100 lot that just shows how dense this area is and doesn't really wow anyone, do floor plans. Differentiate yourself from the other agents. Write professional descriptions. Carl used to make fun of me all the time. I think the whole East Brunswick office used to make fun of me when I joined, right, Carl?
It was an affection. And it was jealousy because of how great they were.
Thank you. And I did not pay him to say that. But answer your calls. Call back missed calls. Signs on all your listings, flyers and brochures. By the way, guys, an agent said to me, well, brochures don't really sell homes. And I'm like, that's not the point. The point is, you go on a listing appointment in that town, how do you demonstrate your marketing material? You had no brochures. Get brochures on your listings. Not only does it appease the seller, but if you're looking to scale and generate and sell more listings and get more listings, you need the marketing material to demonstrate, right? So always get brochures on your listing. All your messaging needs to be consistent. Learn and share, add value, update these investors on the market. Market projections. If you think something's happening, something's changing, there's a shift, let them know. Interest rates and how it affects them. Increased decline in prices, record-breaking prices. This is what investors like to hear. Call an investor and say, hey, by the way, in East Brunswick, a 3-bedroom just broke a record and it's now selling at, and I'm gonna use a random number, $685. Oh my gosh, let's find some 3-bedrooms in East Brunswick. Great, I'm gonna look for stuff for you. What do you have on the plate? What do you have coming up? Easy follow-up, whatever town you're covering. New resources, anything change, let them know. One of the things that I know added value for me was I kept a long list of contractors. Whenever I saw one, whenever I walked through a property, whatever fix or flip, whatever new construction, I took pictures and kept the contact info of all the contractors. So when someone needed, I said, hey, this house was renovated by this contractor. I don't know him, but you want to try him here. Until I started to get to know the contractors myself. But because I had this and no other agents had resources, guess what? The investors stuck with me. So create and keep resources, share them, vet them, talk to them. That's how you're gonna learn pricing, guys. Just like home inspections teach you what's wrong with the house and how you can fix it, when you talk to these contractors, you'll learn pricing, and that makes you a better agent and resource to these investors. The little things, their pain points. Even for those of you that are in our Facebook networking group, I see it all the time. Anyone has someone that can cut the lawn in Edison today, right? That's the same pay point an investor has. So if you can solve those and have a Rolodex of people that you can refer them to, they're gonna love you, because most agents don't, and that's part of the differentiating factor between you and them. So be a problem solver, learn about the town issues, how to navigate them, demonstrate your knowledge, and always share, show them that you're gonna handle everything for them. And I'm gonna wrap up, and we're gonna have Adam come speak about some of the financing so you guys can have a better understanding. But a couple things that are important is talk to talk, learn their jargon. If you can't talk the talk with them, they will see the difference. And investors like to work with agents that know the problems. And if you do invest, kudos, because they actually like that. I stayed away from telling investors I invested because a couple of them said, well, you're gonna take all the good deals. But then over time, I learned to tell them that obviously I can't buy it all, and I'm just a little guy, they're the big guys. I still work as a realtor, and then they got to like me. But if you do invest, if you own a home, talk to them about that. So here's some of the terms that you need to know. ARV, cap rate, and you guys can look this up, NOI, net operating income. Cash on cash, that was what you were talking about, Frank. How much I put out versus what I made. LTV, loan to value, cash flow, building asset class. This is a little bit more commercial. Vacancy rate, that's a big one for landlords. You guys need to really look at vacancy rate, because a 3-bedroom that rents for $2,000 a month, there's going to be a vacancy period, and you got to factor that in. Landlords factor it in, a lot of realtors don't, because what is the turnover? And now you got to add in for vacancy rate. So gross operating income, 1031 exchanges, opportunity zones. And this is a joke, but it's not a joke. I've had agents not know the difference between a furnace and a boiler. And like, I've had buyer agents call me and they're like, the boiler won't turn on. I'm like, it's a furnace. The boiler, how do you get it on? It's a furnace. But are they gonna fix the boiler? It's a furnace, right? Like, know the difference, because if you have that conversation with an investor, they're gonna laugh the same way you guys are laughing. Right, but learn the basics. At home inspections, pay attention. Learn the basics. So, if you're in that space, they're gonna be attracted to you, but that's how you can build value to investors. That's how you can retain them. And guys, as I said at the beginning, this isn't a training on stop what you're doing and go shift to working with investors. But if you guys can find the real guys that are doing, or gals doing 5, 10, 3 properties a year, dive in and go deep with them, because you can build a business alongside them. And if you could pick up 3 of those guys doing 3 properties each, that's 9 properties a year that you don't have to go on listing appointments for, you don't have to farm to, you don't have to cold call, you don't have to door knock, and it's just repeat business. Working with investors, here's the beauty, and this is a real example of how it works. You sell them a property, you may walk through and say, hey, do this, open concept, add a bath, finish this, finish the basement. 3 months, 6 months later, they call you, here's the lockbox code, it's ready, go see it, send me paperwork. Is that one of the easiest and most friendly listing calls you're ever gonna get? Talk about a come list me. So that's why I wanted to share this with you guys today. If you find an investor, be confident, use these tools so that you can work with them, because it is a way to add on to your business and really scale on the listing side. Carl?
I think you bring up a good point about people who are investors and people who own an investment property.
Yep.
What's some of the ways would you screen that to see if they were an investor or had an investment property?
So I had about 8 or 9 questions on a couple slides back, but you just have to ask them questions. One of the main ones are, and just off the top of my head, who's on your team? If they have no team, they've never done it, right? How are you financing these properties? And usually you're gonna hear cash and say, by cash, do you mean hard money financing? And when they say yes, you know, that's a telltale sign. Ask them, how many have they done before?
Yeah, I would say in my prior life as an REO agent, one question I used to ask people was, how many properties have you purchased in the last 12 months?
Yep, how many have you done before? How many have you purchased in the last 12 months? What are you working on now that I can come see? Right, and there's gonna be some telltale signs when they ask you, well, how much work does it need? How much is it gonna cost? That's impossible to answer because your contractor's price is different than my contractor's price. Your scope of work is different than my scope of work as far as what I'm doing to it. So you gotta ask questions, but if you can find those guys, go deep with them. With that, I wanna turn it over to Adam, who is going to explain some of the financing options for hard money. Generating the client, finding the property is one thing, helping them finance it is another important factor. And this is, the financing on hard money is kind of like the interest rates, it's up and down. So with no further ado, Adam Elias from First Team Mortgage, all yours, buddy.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Everyone in the back hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. So before I get into the presentation, I do want to just comment on one thing Olivier said about how surprisingly easy it is to go from 0 to 100 when you're an investor. You know, tomorrow marks 6 years from when my wife and I purchased our first home. Purchased our first home in Malibu with 5% down payment. At that time, I didn't know you could buy a house with 5% down. I was not in the real estate business. Did a lot of self-research and learned while we were planning our wedding that we could afford a house for just $14,000. That was house number 1. Fast forward 6 years. Tomorrow I will be signing the loan package for my 10th property in my portfolio. So it just tells you that each year that goes by, it's an addiction. Carl says to me all the time, there are worse addictions to have, but it is something that once you get in the group of, and once you learn how to do effectively, you can quickly scale and quickly add a lot of value to your portfolio. So first thing I'm going to go over when I go into types of Olivier's green button. Switch screens. Oh, there you go. All right, so when we talk about what kind of financing we do, you know, Olivier spoke at length about the hard money financing. I'm not going to get into hard money. I think hard money is really a last resort. I try to exhaust all the best options that I can for my clients before we have to get into a hard money option. So I split it up between traditional financing and non-traditional financing. For traditional financing, first thing is FHA. A lot of people kind of tend to forget that FHA loans can be used for your first investment property. Now again, we are making a differentiation between people who own investment properties and investors, but you talk to a lot of investors and I'm sure you'll find that most of them, if not all of them, have at least one FHA loan in their portfolio. Of course, the FHA loan is the best option because it's a 3.5% down payment. You will not find any other lender that will give you a 4-family property for as low of a down payment as 3.5%. It is owner occupied though, so you do have to occupy the unit, you do have to live there. If you're going to live in a 1 to 2 unit property with an FHA loan, does that mean you can never use an FHA loan again if you want to get another multifamily property? Anybody? No. You just have to move into the next property and you have to occupy that property. But you are allowed to have more than one FHA loan in your portfolio as long as you are owning the property or intend to own the property and occupy the property at the time that you're purchasing it. Something to keep in mind for FHA is that if you are going to be going in with a partner for an investment and that person is not going to be occupying the property with you, that 3.5% down payment does rise up to 25%. A lot of people don't know that until they get into the thick of it. More on traditional financing, there's two types of conventional properties. When you make your application for a conventional loan, are you buying it as a primary residence or are you buying it as an investment property? A lot of people think that even if they're living in the property on a conventional loan that they have to apply for an investment property. That's just not the case. If you're living in a 2 to 4 family property, much like the FHA, you are applying for a primary residence. Now, why does that matter? Because a primary residence is going to come in with a lower down payment and better interest rates, better terms. So if you're buying a conventional property as a primary residence for 2 units, you have a minimum down payment of 15%. And I say minimum because depending on your credit score, depending on how many properties you have in your portfolio, depending on your debt to income ratio, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac may require a higher down payment. Payment jumps up to 25% for 3 to 4 units. Once you hit 5 to 8 units in bigger projects, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, it's outside their wheelhouse, then you gotta go into non-traditional financing. For conventional investment properties, when you're applying from the gate as an investment property, you're expected to produce about 20% down payment for 1 unit, 25% for 2 to 4 units. Investment properties that are financed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do come with a much higher interest rate. This year, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac really took advantage of the fact that they lost a lot of money during 2020 and 2021 low historic rates. They started the year off with 2.125% loan level price adjustment. That means that when you look at your par interest rate and they're pricing out a loan, they're automatically adding a minimum of 2% to that par interest rate if you're buying an investment property. They're punishing you for making money, but it's the cost of doing business. There are limitations, though, to getting traditional financing through FHA conventional loan, right? You're at the mercy of the Fannie and Freddie Mac guidelines if you're buying a conventional property, and you're at the mercy of the FHA guidelines for FHA. If you're going to get an investment property, you cannot have any gift funds at all under the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. That means all that money's got to come out of your pocket. There is a limit to how many properties you can have in your investment portfolio that are financed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and that is a limit of 10 properties. Now, there are exceptions to that. The most probably notable one is that commercial properties, if you're buying a 4A office building, something that's strictly for commercial use, that does not need a residential loan, if you're getting that through a bank, that will not count towards your 10 property portfolio. As you start to get more properties in your portfolio, you're expected to have more reserves. And they get more and more strict as you go up to that 10 limit. You're expected to have up to 2 to 6 months of a full monthly mortgage payment per property in your portfolio in reserves. Now, when we say reserves, it doesn't mean that it actually has to be liquid. It doesn't have to be money. You don't have to liquidate and rate out your 401k, but you do have to produce some kind of documentation to show that if, things for your luck turns for the worst and you really run out of money, you're gonna have enough money out of pocket to be able to pay up to 2 months, if not 6 months, per property. If you lose your job, have a huge loss in the stock market, you gotta have enough reserves. Qualifying income for traditional financing is also something very important, because when you're relying on that income to help you qualify for the next investment property, you have to look at how they're gonna qualify that rental income. So if you're going to be buying an investment property that has vacant units and you're writing up a lease that you're going to use to qualify, they're only going to take 75% of that income. So you may have a lease for $1,800, they're only going to take 75% of that $1,800 and count that towards your qualifying income. If you already have an existing tenant that's already there and you're going to refinance, for example, like when you want to use that rental income, they're going to look at 100% of your Schedule E from the year prior. That can work to your advantage or it can really hurt you depending on how many deductions you've taken. Because if you've taken a lot of deductions and your rent may be a lot higher, they'll actually compute your rent to be based on those deductions. Because they'll take 100% of how you've calculated your rent to be in the past. So Once you've exhausted your options with traditional financing, now you gotta go into alternative financing, better known as non-QM. Non-QM is where it's at right now in all the lenders because rates are getting very high. It used to be that non-QM was something no one would consider because non-QM would come in at about 7 or 8% when you're buying a FHA or conventional loan for 3 or 4%. Well, that gap now is getting, shorter and shorter as these interest rates go up. Now you'd be surprised to get a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conventional loan for 5 or 6% and only pay about 7%, maybe 7.5% for a non-QM loan. So sometimes it makes more sense, and proof is in the pudding that all the big lenders, whether it be UWM, Loan Depot, Caliber, whoever that is financing big mortgages, they're all now getting into the non-QM space. So there's two different kinds of main non-QM loans that people think about. The first one are bank statement loans. Bank statement loans, who's that going to benefit? It's going to benefit somebody that may be self-employed, but they don't have 2 full years of tax returns to show that they've been self-employed for 2 years. Or maybe they do have the 2 years, maybe they've had a business for over 10 years, but they really like their deductions. These are people that have a lot of zeros on the top line of their tax return, and then maybe 1 0 at the very bottom, or maybe a negative. Comes back to bite you because you may have saved a lot of money during tax time, but you're not going to qualify for a lot of real estate with those tax returns. So the alternative is to use your bank statements. If you have a lot of cash flow coming in every month, let's say you run a restaurant, you have $20,000 to $30,000 a month in receipts that's being deposited into your account. What they're going to do, first thing they're going to do is take a 50% default expense ratio. So what does that mean? They're going to assume automatically that 50% of that money that you brought in was used for business expenses, payroll, rent, all the administrative expenses that come with running a business. Now I say default expense ratio because that number can get a lot smaller if your CPA is willing to work with you and show historically how much your business actually costs you in overhead a month. But the set default expense ratio is 50%. So if you have $20,000 coming into your business bank account in January, automatically they're going to cut that in half to $10,000. That's the number they're going to work with when they determine your debt to income ratio. So if you have a 50% debt to income ratio, which is the conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac limit for DTI, out of that $20,000, how much are you able to use for your borrowing power for your global debt? It's 50% of 10,000, 5,000. Another growing space is 1099 income loans. So this is going to appeal to realtors, 1099 gig economy employees who maybe are not relying on their tax returns, they're not relying on a paycheck, they're relying on their 1099s. And surprisingly, 1099 income, they have a much lower expense ratio at 10%. So for any realtors in this room that may have a very strong 1099 from a lot of real estate sales, you'd be surprised to know that we have programs where we can qualify you for investment property starting with a 10% default expense ratio. Now, some lenders will raise that expense ratio depending on the business that you're in. They assume that realtors don't have a lot of expenses. Any realtor worth his salt knows how to take advantage of the tax code and declare as many deductions as you can, but if you have not filed your taxes yet, or if you opt not to show your tax returns, and you do have strong 1099s, you may want to look into these products. Going back to the 1099 income loans, so they're looking at year-to-date bank statements, and they're also looking at your year-to-date profit and loss. So if you had a strong year in 2021, they want to make sure that that strong year is going into 2022. So it's not always necessarily the best option, but if you are a realtor that's scaling your business and following the great advice of Olivier and Carl, you will be able to qualify for that loan. Yes, sir.
Does that require 2 years of your 1099 or 1?
It depends on the lender. It depends on how strong your 1099 is and how long you've been in the business. Now, alternatives to bank statement loans, see for me, I've been trained as an attorney and now as a loan officer that less is more. I think it's a nightmare to show anybody 12 to 24 months of bank statements because you're just opening a lot more doors to questions. So I try to avoid bank statement loans. I go right for the DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. If you talk to me at all in a 24-hour span, you'll probably hear me talk about DSCR no less than 50 times to my friends, to my fellow colleagues, to my wife. My wife now knows DSCR better than I do. DSCR is great because we're not looking at any personal income. And as long as I've been working with DSCR loans, it actually hit me right in the face last week. No personal income required means that you don't need to have a job. So the answer to the age-old question, can you get a mortgage without a job? Yes, you can if you get a DSCR loan. Even when you're filling out the application, you're instructed by the lender to leave that section blank. They don't even want to know anything about it. They don't want to know your employer information. They don't want to know how much money you're earning. They don't want to know how much money you're earning from your investments. They want to leave all that income blank because the only income that they're looking at is the income on the property. DSCR is a common formula used for commercial properties. They look at the business's health. They're also looking at, what kind of rent does the business expect to get out of their commercial investment. So for a DSCR, they're looking at a ratio of 1.0 to 1.25 times your mortgage payment in rent. So let's say your mortgage payment is $2,000 a month. They want to see a fair market value of $2,000, or if it's 1.25, $2,500, right? But some of these lenders are outdoing themselves with something called no ratio loans. They're really competing very hard right now, and they're saying, you know what? We'll take a ratio that's less, maybe 65 to 70% of the LTV, as long as you have a very strong down payment. We'll take no ratio at all, down to zero. As long as we show that you are making a very healthy down payment towards the project, you don't have to worry about the ratio, but you do have to worry about a higher interest rate. Another great advantage to DSCR that I'm personally taking advantage of is the 20% down payment for 2 to 4 units. You will never find a 20% down payment for 2 to 4 units on a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac multifamily property. Tomorrow I'm closing on a 3-family property with just 20% down. That 5% difference is saving me $30,000 out of pocket in equity that I can use towards other things. No vacancy rate. They're not looking at 75% of what your market rent is. They're taking your market rent or your lease rent, whichever is lower, and they're taking that dollar for dollar and comparing that to your monthly mortgage payment. No limit. These lenders are telling you you can have up to 20, 50, 100 properties if you want to. Working on it with DSCR loans with a couple clients, they say it's addictive. Once you get started in it, because it's so easy to get together, all you need is your appraisal, your title, your insurance. Once you get that rolling, you're on to the next one. And a lot of these lenders offer DSCR programs in other states that we're not even licensed in. Depending on what states that specific company is licensed in, some companies may be licensed in Colorado, some companies may be licensed in Washington or Florida. We're able to do those loans in other states, even if we're not licensed in those states, for the same terms. That's something to think about when you're looking to expand your portfolio to Florida, Idaho, Utah, a lot of the states right now where a lot of investors are running to. So unlike the traditional financing of a conventional or an FHA loan, what's the difference here? There's less flexibility when you have the traditional financing, but you have a lot more flexibility with the alternative financing because your guidelines are not subject to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are buying the loans on the secondary market. Your guidelines are subject to the lender who's giving you the money because they're usually the ones that are holding the paper. So with that flexibility, there's other customizations that you can do to take advantage of. One of them being interest only. Right now you're going to see a lot of lenders are offering 40-year interest only mortgages. Now there's talks that the Department of HUD is looking to possibly roll out a 40-year mortgage sometime in the near future. That may very well happen. They are doing 40-year loans now for modifications for people who fell behind during the pandemic. But just strictly for investors who want to take advantage of lower payments for the first 10 years of their term, whether it's a 30-year mortgage or a 40-year mortgage, they can have interest-only payments. Now, why would you want to do interest-only payments? Why would you want to save, why would you want to not build that equity? Because you're trying to increase your cash flow. Remember, those first few years of your mortgage payments are mostly interest anyway. So the few $100 that you can put back into your pocket or put towards another property, every dollar counts when you're dealing with investors who are just looking at their monthly cash flow above all else. Why do the banks want to encourage interest only? Because they're usually tacked on with a prepayment penalty. In the state of New Jersey and a couple other states, lenders, whether they be for traditional financing or alternative financing, are not allowed to charge prepayment penalties to individuals. So the workaround that these companies are starting to do is they're letting borrowers close in an entity like an LLC, and then they're offering a prepayment penalty anywhere from 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. The higher the term of your prepayment penalty, the better of a rate you're gonna get. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're holding the paper. So the way they're making their money, especially if it's interest only, is they're making money off that interest for the first 5 years that you're holding that paper. That's not to say that you can't prepay a little bit of that principal during those 5 years, but you will be subject to a penalty based on how much of that payment that you make. Some of these lenders offer fix and flip loans. They know that fix and flip is a big game. They're offering loans for 12 to 18 months. And I say these lenders because you no longer have to go to a hard money lender to get a fix and flip loan. You can go to Finance of America. That's one of the lenders that we work with. They specialize in these fix and flip loans. And they look at your track record, they look at your liquidity. The more of these that you do, the easier it is to get financing with them. You can get a bridge loan to help you get from buying that initial property, fixing it up, and flipping it within 3 months. So these are all things that we offer as a mortgage company that we're always willing to talk about. We work with about 30 different lenders, and we're constantly signing up new lenders that have new programs. It's not like, there's a lot more companies competing in this space. But as we're starting to realize is that these companies are a lot less stable than your big mortgage, staples like your Rocket, your UWM. These companies will turn their lights off overnight. So when you submit a loan for one of these lenders, you want to make sure that your clients have their ducks in a row. You want to make sure your clients, as you're showing them their properties, that they're already getting their documentation in order. Because we want to give them a full submission when we start this process. Because a lot of times they're not going to give us extensions. They may turn their lights off because they're being funded by institutional investors. I remember the week before the world shut down, March 13th, 2020, as a closing attorney at the time, I lost a lot of deals that week because a lot of institutional investors were waking up saying, we cannot gamble this, we are not going to be financing these loans. Sprout Mortgage, just last week, Sprout Mortgage has been in this space for over a decade. They turned their lights off permanently because they sell their loans to Chase Bank. Not Fannie and Freddie, to Chase Bank. And Chase Bank said, we're not really trying to take too many of these loans right now. So they lost a lot of that demand, and in turn, the company ended up having to shut its doors. So there's still companies popping up left and right every day, and we're always signing up with them, but we want to get their loans submitted as quickly as possible and as complete as possible so we can move on to the next one. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What would be a negative? I just heard so many positives with working with the DSCR. Is there a catch, or is it that unreliability of them kind of shutting down?
The biggest negative I'd say is the higher interest rates. For me, I wanted to test out the DSCR loan before I started to promote it, so I did my first DSCR loan last month on a $200,000 property, single-family property in Jamesburg. I ended up closing with a 5-year prepayment penalty with a 7.5% interest only. So you can customize and mix around with these different customizations. And people looked at me like I was crazy. Why would you do 7.5%? Because I didn't feel like gathering paperwork for the other 8 properties that I have, because I have to show 2 to 3 months of mortgage statements for each of those properties. I have to show the taxes that I paid in the last year for each of those properties. I have to show the insurance policy. And I'm so lazy that I'd rather just pay the extra point at a 7.5%. But for me, because the loan amount was so low, it really didn't make that much of a difference to go from a 5.5 to 6 to 7.5. As your loan amount increases, you're going to want to get the best rate that you can. But for me, this is a property that I'm cash, because it's interest only, I'm only paying $1,000 a month for the mortgage. I'm going to rent this house out for $2,000. That's all cash flow. If I did nothing else to this house, after the 5-year prepayment term was up, I could sell it again for $200,000 at least, right? You would hope. And I'm still making $12,000 year over year. So my investment, my 20% investment was $40,000. If I made $12,000 a year on rent on $40,000, that's a 30% cash on cash return for 5 years. So it is going to be a higher rate always. And that's one of the real negatives. That's why people kind of shy away from it. Just by hearing the number, they psych themselves out. But if you actually take the time to show them the numbers, they'll realize that they're really not that far off from where they would be had they done traditional financing. Yes, sir.
With an existing tenant, is there a favorability for having a lease versus month-to-month? A lot of times we find month-to-month tenants.
Favorability, I mean, it depends on really, that's a lender-specific preference. Some lenders like to see units that are fully occupied. They won't even lend, especially in the mixed-use space. We're having a really hard time securing reliable lenders on mixed-use properties. They seem to frown upon vacant units. So they do want to see a long-term lease. I know like in the commercial space, when you get a commercial appraisal, they will not value a month-to-month lease the same way they will value a multi-year lease. I don't know that that's necessarily the problem for appraisals on these loans, but it is something that they are keeping an eye on. Going back to that topic of appraisals real quick, because that's really the only thing that this loan is based on, these appraisals are being scrutinized very heavily. We're getting appraisals coming back with like 20 conditions where the lenders are asking a lot of questions to these appraisers because this is all they're going by. If they're taking this loan with no income, they're looking at your credit score, they're looking to see that you have seasoned assets, so you still have to have the money in the bank for 2 or 3 months. Again, some lenders may only ask for 1 month, some may ask for 3. They're still looking at those traditional criteria, but they're not looking at your income. You can be unemployed. So they want to make sure that this property appraisal, the value, everything checks out, and the criteria they're using makes sense. And these appraisals are very readily transferable. So the good news is that when these lenders turn their lights off, we take that appraisal that we've done, we take whatever we've done already, and we can move it pretty quickly. We've been able to do that pretty successfully within a week turnaround. Any other questions? I know we covered a lot of material very quickly, but please reach out to myself, to Mike, to Joe, to anybody at First Team Mortgage, Diane. We're always here to help. We're always here to work out these crazy loans. Yes?
Can I get your phone number?
Sure. My phone number is 908-930-0177.
Thank you.
Thank you. Olivier.
Couple quick announcements. For everyone that scanned their card into Vicky, we will be doing a raffle sponsored by First Team Mortgage. So thank you for the raffle. She will email the winner the prize, so thank you. And a big save the date. I'm very excited. It's Carl and I's very favorite training. We're doing that September the 14th, and we are doing another top agent panel. So we're bringing in agents, some from the state, some from outside of the state, different companies, and we will be doing a top agent panel that's going to be September the 14th. So save that date. Thank you guys all for coming. Any questions? I am here sticking around for a little bit. So thanks again. Have a great day.